I'm Cindy, and something happened in my life recently. Looking ahead, I will say that this situation changed not only my life, but probably life in our entire small city. My parents and I moved to this city about a year ago. It happened that in our native place, it became unbearable to live. Because of the big fuss, traffic jams, and skyscrapers, my mother began to feel bad, and we decided that it was time to change the location. Without hesitation, Dad said that we could go to the town where he lived as a child. It is small, cozy, there is a lot of vegetation, and a small population. Just what we needed. In general, having collected our things, we quickly found a house where we could stay indefinitely, or maybe forever. Who knows? Personally, I liked the place. Of course, it was a long way away to lose friends, acquaintances. After all, we lived there all my life and I was born there, but my mother's health was a priority, so I agreed without a doubt. The locals, for some reason, looked at us sideways, as if they were wary. I thought that this is always the case in small towns and they will soon get used to us, but we were immediately lucky because we quickly found our new home and at a very budget price, and the house was nice and beautiful with a garage and a beautiful frontage. And when a couple of days passed, we took apart the boxes, put everything away, and exhaled. Some neighbors came to visit us to drink tea and get acquainted. It seemed nice of them. During the introduction, they asked if we had seen our strange neighbor yet. According to the woman, he is called a city maniac, and all because he served time in prison for the brutal violence of a little girl, a schoolgirl. He was in prison for a long time and then came out for good behavior early, and now he lives alone nearby. And the funny thing is that he constantly burns the house in which we now live. A neighbor told us this to warn us just in case. This moment was a bit confusing for all of us, but my parents said that it looks like an urban legend that everyone knows, but no one knows for sure. We were too well settled here to pack up and leave just for the sake of gossip. I immediately Googled the story and found some newspaper clippings about a man named Mason Scott being arrested and convicted on a high-profile charge of a violent crime. The next day, when I went out for a walk and looked around the area, I saw a man who looked like the same Mason. He was standing not far from the house and looked at me directly. To be honest, it was kick-ass creepy. I was even confused, but pretended not to notice and went on without looking back. After a while, I already met with local teenagers. They began to show interest after they found out where I lived. "Yes, I'm living at our house. Here is a celebrity," I said jokingly, to which they reacted frighteningly. Like, when the time comes, you'll find out. I tried not to tell these things to my parents, so as not to cause panic, but I was already worried inside. The day I went to school for the first time, it rained hard, and I just loved to look out the window and daydream. In class, I even chose a place by the window and looked out at the street, when suddenly the shadow of this man, our neighbor, suddenly appeared behind the glass. He was all wet and dirty and with a terribly empty look. I screamed in the middle of the class. Everyone looked at me, and the guy was gone. When I got home, I told my parents everything, and they promised to call the police next time. But this moment was repeated that night, only now he was looking out of my window in my room. As soon as I saw him, I wanted to scream, but he quickly climbed over and grabbed me, covering my mouth with his hand. I was trying to get out, and I was more scared than I'd ever been in my life. I started crying and begging for mercy, and he kept whispering, "Don't scream. I won't hurt you, I promise." I listened to him, he let me go, and I began to breathe deeply. Suddenly, he began to cry, knelt down, and begged me not to call anyone. "I need your help," he said in a whisper. It surprised me. I said I'd listen to him tomorrow afternoon in the park. He begged me to come alone and left. I thought about telling my parents for a long time, but then I decided to find out what was wrong with him alone. As I promised, I came to the park in time. He was already sitting on the bench, waiting for me. I timidly approached, and he immediately reassured me that he would not harm me. And then he said that he was in prison with impunity, that he was framed, that he did not kill that girl, that he worked as a regular pizza delivery guy and came to this house to order, and a crime was pinned on him. There's evidence for this in the video that's hidden in our house, but he doesn't know where, and I have to find it. I didn't believe him, of course, and I said I'd look for him and went home, and I thought he was just crazy. In the evening of the same day, my mother called me and said that she and Dad were late at work. They had a big presentation of the project and they would stay late. I closed all the windows and doors and went to bed. I woke up to a sharp noise, as if something was broken. I jumped out of bed and walked slowly to the kitchen. When I came down, I saw that our entire living room was trashed. Everything was on the floor. I got scared and ran towards the phone. And in the corridor, someone grabbed me from behind, closed my mouth, and tied my hands. I thought it was him, Mason. The man was wearing a mask and he was asking about some recording. It's definitely him, I thought, and somehow he said I didn't find it. The masked man sat me down in a chair and started turning the whole house over. While he was busy, I ran towards the exit, but he managed to catch up with me. I pulled my hands and mouth free and started screaming. The man tried to tie my mouth again, but at that moment, someone came home and hit the attacker. The man was Mr. Mason. He fought the attacker for a long time and finally managed to knock him out. Scared, I called the police. At the police station, I told them that our neighbor saved my life. The guy was a man from a neighboring state who had also been in prison for violent crimes. My parents arrived in a panic and took me home. Mom said we should get out of the city as soon as possible. She somehow calmed down, and in the morning, I went into the room and wanted to go to bed, but I still couldn't get the video out of my head. I decided to look for it in our house, and I did, but it was nowhere to be found. The next day, my mother asked me to pack my things to leave, and I had to go through my closet again. While I was doing this, I hit something in the closet and a secret door opened inside it. There was some kind of flash drive in there. When I saw it, I was just in shock. I immediately ran to my dad and told everything as it was. He didn't want to get involved at first, but I insisted. How can you live like this, knowing that you could have saved a man's life? By the way, it was he who saved me, I shouted. While my mother was sleeping, my father and I went to the station and handed the flash drive to them and immediately called Mr. Mason to the station. In the end, there was a lot of discussion. It turned out that the man who attacked me was responsible for everything, and our neighbor is really not guilty of anything, and there was proof of that. The court dropped all charges and the neighbor was compensated. So we helped each other. Since then, a couple of years have passed. This story has long lived amongst the population, but over time, everything has become as before. Well, Mr. Mason is now our good neighbor. He started life with a clean slate, and now his reputation has been changed.